We have Trish Keller. She is the Chief Technology Officer of Citizen Watch. She's going to be sharing the story of Citizen on how it has really implemented a world-class operation in e-commerce. And the great thing that Brian just talked about is that she's going to share is the data, the difficulty, the breadth of information that you need, and why B2B can be a difficult one to match. And she also has to handle omni-channel, so obviously retail and every other channel, including distribution, is required to for Citizen to be successful. Let me introduce and bring forward Trish. Trish, thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Well, everybody, welcome. I'm glad you are able to attend today. Looking forward to speaking to you about the experience that I've been through with Citizen Watch America. Hopefully, you're all familiar with our company and our brand. You might not know that Citizen Watch also has multiple other brands like Accutron, Alpina, Bulova, and we've got a Frederick Constant, which is a Geneva brand. And so we're a very global company, and I'm responsible for the United States and also our other markets in UK, Canada, and Mexico. And so I'll start talking just a bit about how we got to where we are today. So I started with Citizen 6 years ago, and coming on board, one of my areas of expertise had always been to transition companies off of legacy systems into new ERPs. And so I was confronted with the challenge of bringing Citizen off of a legacy system that had been in place for 35 years on an AS400. We had many different systems connected to that AS400, some of them like Lotus Notes and things like that, that you just don't hear about anymore. But all of those systems needed to be replicated in some way in the ERP. The goal was that we don't lose any functionality, because over time we did become pretty robust even within platforms that we were on. And so I just started doing basically a survey and audit of all the systems, and basically found out there were 11 systems just for master data alone, not even including some of the other things that we had going on. And so this was about product data and some customer information as well, but mainly product data. We did have on 11 different databases. And so everybody who would want to use it or look up information, they would be bouncing from one system to the next, logging into a different system. And it really was, what we found is that if the systems weren't maintained in the same way, we didn't have good data. We had one system that you go to for size of watch and another that you go to for web content. At this point is when I really realized that we need to have a single source to feed our ERP. And how do we get there? We have thousands of watches, many thousands of spare parts, which this number has gone up that you're seeing 60,000 spare parts. It's much more than that now. We also knew that we had to manage multiple currencies and languages. And we had to have an ability to follow the product through basically the life cycle, even though it's not a life cycle management that we were looking for, but we did need to understand, like, how do we make sure that we have all the information on an item, and to like the size, the weight, so that the warehouse is going to have information in our WMS to accommodate the data, material data sheets, custom codes, pricing, initial pricing, and all of this. We needed to find a place to put it. And I didn't want to, and wouldn't really accept the thought of putting in 3 different systems to meet our needs. We had to find something that would accommodate all of the integration that we needed and meet our needs. So this is where we came up with, okay, how do we find a single source of truth? And it is a product information management system. I got on when Brian was speaking, and he was talking about the digital acceleration. And if you don't have good data, if you have disparate systems, you are going to be in big trouble with managing it and making sure that what goes out to the public is pristine. And we did realize that early on that we had to find a way to stop the bad data that we had. The master data for our product was needing a lot of work. And so we had to go find a standardized software solution to provide this. What we were looking for is we needed something that was flexible, something that was simple, something that could be managed within my IT team as well as the business users. We didn't want to get something that was so big and complicated that we couldn't figure out how to use it, and the end users would never use it either. So we really had to go through that. We had to find out. We knew that, at the time when we were moving off of the legacy system for Citizen, we were also looking at Bulova, which was also on another legacy system, on another AS400, that we knew that we were going to be bringing them on board as well. And so we had to look at something that was flexible, scalable, and we knew that we could bring our users up to speed pretty quickly and have them able to use it. So that was our challenge, and we really did a lot of looking and talking with people and finding out what other people are using, and we came up with a solution that would provide the information that we needed. And this screen gives you kind of an overview. This is on our e-commerce platform for our direct to consumer. We also have another platform that is our actual, I call it an e-B2B, where we electronically provide information for our B2B customers as well, which they might see more watches on the page because they're going to be putting 5 in a box and not ordering one by one. Also, you'll see the product description on this, and that product description is also, that's for a customer, a consumer on a consumer platform. But it's also like there's different content that would be divvied out to our business to business platform. So we're able to provide different content based on the platform that we're providing the information to. And so that was something that we really did require. We didn't want to keep 2 different databases, one for our Salesforce platform and one for our business to business platform. We wanted to make sure we could keep everything in one spot, and so that's what we did. And so we worked with many different groups and companies to try to get a statement of work and based on what it was we thought we needed. And we finally did, we went through and said, okay, we need to have Amazon, which Brian also talked about. We need to understand how do we get them the proper information, because like he said, I mean, Amazon is definitely a source of information for everybody. Everybody goes there first, and we needed to be multinational, and we had to have omni-channel as well. We had to support our product development team and merchandising team. So as even as we were going through this, we knew that we needed their buy-in. And so this next bullet does tell you we found a PIM. It's by Perfion, and we used this to basically get rid of those 11 systems that I talked about as we began speaking today. We were able to say, okay, almost pushing it beyond, I think, even what they thought it should or could do. And we've had it in place for about 3.5 years, and it's been able to do every single thing we've ever come up with. It feeds our business planning, our logistics, our inventory, our retail sales reporting for the stores, as well as it gives the business visibility. And I mentioned also on the first slide that we use it for our customs to make sure all that information is in there, so we have that updated. So what I did want to mention too about this platform that we chose, and I didn't find this with other companies that we spoke with, one of the things when we started out with the implementation of once we made the decision on Perfion and we decided started on the implementation, there was a really big concern in my company about we've got too much bad data. How do we ever get past that? And so we started off trying to maybe force it through and say, let's fix everything before we put it into Perfion. And working with Perfion, we realized, nope, let's put it in there. And then that is the tool that we actually use to clean up our data. And I think without that, we might still have been today still figuring out how do we get this data perfect. And not to say it's perfect today, we still have users and people looking at it, but how do we get our data cleaned up? And that's how we did it. And we had to get past that point of thinking we had to have perfect data to put into this system. And I think that's one of the biggest parts of the implementation, was just realizing we're just going to have to move forward and start cleaning the data once it's in the system. And we still have people today cleaning up data, so I think it's a really important part of PIM being able to do that. During this time, we did put in the new ERP system, and as we brought other brands and division in, like Bulova, everything always started with Perfion. It's like, this is our single source of truth. We don't do anything without having everything in Perfion first. And now everybody in the company knows that. We don't even purchase anything product-wise that is not in Perfion. It all starts there. And holding to that governance and making people understand the value of it has been really very important. And it has just become a very important part of our business. And I did say to Rob when we were talking about this earlier, is that there's probably not a day goes by at Citizen Watch America where you don't hear something about Perfion, because everybody knows it has to start there. And that's been a very important part of our being able to use this for our multi-channels, and I think those are the points I wanted to make clear today. I've kind of gone fast myself, so I'm not sure if there's any questions or any kind of clarification you might need, but I'd be open to that if you don't mind.
Yeah, the good news is, Trish, people want to ask questions of you, so I've already got a couple queued up, and
Okay.
it looks like, according to the flashing red on my screen, some more are coming in. The first question is, how much did you have to work on data, right? You talked about, you had to clean up data, and that Perfion helped you, but why and how and how much?
Well, we had a lot of bad data. If you can imagine, I mean, we just didn't have things corrected. One thing I would say, we spent a great deal of time initially, and we worked very closely with Perfion, their implementer that worked with us, and also there was somebody on the IT team who is just very, very good at data and understanding database structures. So it wasn't just in a box that we did this. I mean, we worked really closely with Perfion, but as we had like maybe the same SKU across many databases, we had to decide what's going to be the good data, what's not. And Perfion did allow us to like choose, like maybe something's called pink, what rose gold and pink gold and all the different attributes you might have for an item. And we wanted to synchronize those, right? So we always wanted everything, if it's rose gold, it's rose gold. It's not going to be RSGLD. It's going to be the same thing across, for every item that has that attribute. And so I would say we spent 3 months perhaps cleaning up our data. It was quite extensive.
Wow. All right. Actually, I as I see them come in, here's kind of a related follow-on question. So I'm sorry, I'm jumping to the back, folks. I'll get to your questions, but it seems overwhelming to have started this conversion process. How long did it take? And so you just said it took three months for really getting cleaned up, but what was I'll just add, what was your process, and how long did these steps take?
So we probably started this about 6 months, maybe it was 9 months before we were going to go live with our Microsoft Dynamics Nav ERP. And so we started because we knew we had a lot of work to do, and we knew that this had to be the first place. And so we probably spent about 9 months getting it ready. Now, what happened, that was for our initial implementation of using the Perfion to update our ERP. After that, when we brought on other brands or divisions, we were able to streamline that because we had the structure in place. And maybe when we brought on Canada, we needed to add like another field, because obviously the French and French language and the Canadian currency. So those things, we implemented over time. It wasn't, I would say, I think it's quick by what it would have took us to try to integrate all those different systems into a new ERP. So building this out in comparison to that was a shortcut.
Well, now I'm jumping. This is all coming together, so I'm skipping a bunch of questions again, but a question came in. What made you decide that PIM must be leading instead of ERP, right? And you were just mentioning the integration piece, but I in my business get asked a lot, well, why can't I do this in an ERP, right? That's why I have an ERP. Why do I need a PIM? Maybe we phrase it that way.
That's a really good question, because I don't know, like I had never ever implemented one before at any other company I'd worked at. But I did realize, I mean, we are definitely a product driven company, and we are also feeding so much more than just our ERP. And, when we looked into the functionality of Microsoft Dynamics, it's really not a master data warehouse. I mean, it provides transactions, it's transactional. And so I really had to kind of think about this and think, what could we use? And I just started looking around online and seeing what other people are doing. And I didn't see anything quite as big as what we ended up doing, but I did see that, okay, why not? And at first I thought we could just build our own PIM. We could just get everything together in a single database, a SQL database, and manage this ourselves. But then when I started looking at, Perfion and several other products that I did check out, I realized, well, they can do so much more. And so why not? And let me go to the executive team and talk about it. Let's talk about how we can, really drive all our other channels with this data, not just the ERP, because we needed it everywhere else too.
Oh, that's great. Now I'm going to go back to the front of the line, and that is someone asked, what is product syndication into Amazon? How does this PIM help you with Amazon? What exactly does that do, Trish?
I think it basically makes sure that their information is up to date. Obviously, they have ways of going out and getting other information, so it's not always. But I would say this is not just for Amazon, for any of our other business customers. We can provide them clean, real data that they can use, and we know it's good, and we know it matches our brand, and it's signed off by our marketing team, and it gives that information.
Excellent. Here's someone asked, what was your selection criteria? What did it really have to do compared to other things that you looked at?
Okay, so there are several things. First of all, we had to have flexibility and scalability. I didn't want something that every time I wanted to add another brand, I'm going to get another bill, just to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I wanted to make sure that this is something that can grow with us as a company. And about creating attributes, I mean, we have a lot of attributes related to each one of our products. And so I didn't want to be limited for any reason that for maybe we have all our parts in the system. I wanted to be able to flex on those attributes. I wanted to be able to use it for, like I said, for the customs. There's a portion of it that we actually do to calculate the gross profit on initial product. I mean, we had to be able to do all those things. And so that was really important. I didn't need a canned solution. So that's the thing about Perfion too. It is very customizable, and it's based on your criteria. I think that's also, it's the good news and the bad news. You also have to have some control and have governance, because if you let everybody put everything they want in there, eventually you're just going to end up where you were before with bad data. So we do have to govern it, and we have somebody on the IT team who really does hold it very close to her heart and takes very good care to make sure that we go through change control for any changes that we make to it, and make sure that every decision we make is the right one for the future, and not, we're not going to have a duplicate data in there. So we're very careful about that. But those were the basic, criteria. We also like the ability, like we can mass import data into Perfion, so we do the mass importing. And so like when we have the new product launches, we don't have to have somebody sitting in there typing away. They've already got their sheets that they're working on. We can mass import it, and we can export it as well. We could take it out and create cell sheets or whatever we want to do. We needed that flexibility.
Excellent. So let me ask, how important was usability? That's another question that just came in, and how usable is it compared to other things you looked at?
So that was really important. We needed a way that we could really make sure the business would use it, and it wouldn't just become something that IT maintains. That's been every bit of our projects going forward since we started getting off of legacy systems. It was like, no more does IT manage the product information. We have to make sure this is a usable application that people understand, and they own it too, and they buy into it. And that was a very important part of this, because so oftentimes you get things that are so complicated, you really can't even, the business is just too big of a learning curve. And so that was very important for this. And I know that Perfion was very patient with us, because they were in a lot of meetings with our users, and we just kept going back and forth and saying, okay, wait, how do we make this easier? How do we make sure that people are doing this correctly and they know the right thing to do? And on a recent upgrade, we were the ones in IT that would do the mass updates, but now we do have a limited amount that people in the business can do on their own, and they're loving it. They're able to really own it. They don't have to wait and open a ticket and maybe wait 3 or 4 days until it gets up in the queue for IT. And so the users using the system is key.
Oh, great. Here's the question then that goes on to that, right? Can you provide any results about ROI and what to expect when implementing this kind of system?
I did do an ROI analysis some time ago, and really our return on this was being able to get rid of other systems that we were also paying licensing fees on.
Mm-hmm.
It was really through that I could actually go to the accounting team and say, this is what we're saving. As far as as we move forward and as we use it now, I mean, there's no way we would have the systems we have now with the data that we do if we did not have this. And so I don't know, going forward now, it's just a part of us doing business. But initially, it really was. We saved a lot, and over time, it wasn't like day one everything got fed by Perfion. It happened over time. Initially, it was NAF, and then an API to our B2B and our e-commerce solution. And so we started little by little, and basically all the time we're looking at how else can we use it? How else can we, what else can we get rid of? Is there anything else out there that's not being fed by Perfion that should be?
Okay, so it seems like you rolled this out in pieces, but here's a good question that follows on that one, and that is, how did you sell it internally? Everyone wants to know, how do you go to your management and get their interest? Obviously, you had an accounting approach, but what did you have to do to sell this to management?
That's a good question. And so I don't think anybody in management really realized the value of this. And a lot of times people will say, well, if you got 11 databases, who cares? It's all working right. But I think it was identifying the problems and really putting that out there and saying, this is the problem that we have, and this is how much money we're paying to support that problem, instead of trying to find a solution. And I do think I went through many iterations and discussions with, at the time, and Rob, I talked to you about this, when I started, I was a vice president of IT for Citizen Watch. And so I came in, with really the task before me to get us off legacy. And there had to be that kind of conversation as well. If we're going to get off legacy, then we're not going to be pulling data for our website from a Lotus Notes database that's on an AS400. We have to start, being nimble we want to accelerate our digital, which we've been talking about for years at Citizen, and if we're going to do that, we have to be nimble, we have to have good data. And it was basically, and then getting buy-in from marketing and the product development team, everybody, basically once they saw it, they were like, oh my gosh, the light went on, this is what we need. And so I brought in the other people in the business and had them see the vision as well, and that helped us move it forward too.
Oh, fantastic. Here's another question. Do you consider Perfion to be your product MDM? Let me throw out some definitions for the audience. MDM is Master Data Management. PIM is Product Information Management, and DAM is Digital Asset Management. But do you consider Perfion to be your MDM, Trish?
All right, so I do. We also do have a DAM, just so you know. That is for our digital asset management, and Perfion does not handle our digital assets. We have a DAM, and it's fed with an API from Perfion, and Perfion gets digital assets back to it. The DAM's been in place, but the DAM is also available to our customers. They use it for their advertising and that type of thing, their media. But I do consider it a product data management system as well, because for our product, it is the single source of truth, and it is where we manage all data. There's nothing that would not go through there.
Wow. All right, excellent. Next question is around user adoption. The question is, user adoption is critical. Do you have any recommendations on how to get your team on board with all these changes in processes and the new ways of doing things? I'll add, it also sounds like you have users outside of IT, right? And that's got to be one of the benefits. So how do you get everyone working off that same page?
I think that how we started this was really about communication. We had to talk about it over and over again and not give up, right? If you believe in it and this is how you have to go and how you need to do, move forward as a company, you have to talk about it. You have to have the lunches where you sit there and go through it and people are scratching their heads, because a lot of people, most people aren't that technical, quite honestly. And so at first it kind of looks, I think it was, daunting, like, oh my gosh, how do we ever get all our data in there and how's it going to work? And I know Hans Hendrik came out from Denmark many times to work with this on it. He worked with our business team, and it was a conversation about, we had to internalize this. We had to make it part of, this is what we're going to do, and let's work together. And if you don't understand it, ask another question. Also, Shirley on my team, who's been in charge of implementing this, there's, even today, there's never ever a moment that we won't have people in a room and say, let's go through this together and let's take a look at it. And working together and showing the product, Perfion, and just continuing to communicate is, I think that's one of the key parts of this.
Oh, that's great. There's another question. Okay. Can you give me an example of, first, how this data is integrated into your other data, and two, what type of analysis did this data help you accomplish that wasn't done before?
Okay, so I'll tell you how this works for us. So when we start having a concept of a product, it starts getting set up in Perfion. And this, I hope this answers the question. If not, the person who asked it can, come back around. But what happens is in Perfion, the product development team starts setting up the product. And then there's a lot of information that has to go in there once we get the samples back and we understand how it's going to work, and we start looking at gross profit, what are we going to sell it for, that type of thing. And then there's basically a check mark that says, okay, this is ready. And so every night the system goes out and looks for the check mark, and if something is in Perfion that has the check mark, it actually goes then into NAV. And so that means that we can actually buy that product, and we can also start, marketing it to other areas. Jim, what was the second question, Rob?
And what type of analysis did all this data help to accomplish that wasn't done before?
I think it's the consistency that we were able to get from having all this data in one spot. We no longer had to, like, we did have like this gross profit calculator that was on the AS400 that was, that was built with COBOL code back in the day, and it actually worked. But what happened is we're bringing in different products, and having something that we could maintain in one spot was really important. And so I think that the ability to see everything in one place is really what changed things.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I guess you know, there's got to be some benefit of entry once, right? I'm always a big fan of that. Instead of
Right.
sticking it in your AS400 and then putting everything else together. Okay, we've got another question, and that is, how did you find Perfion? Were you specifically looking for a PIM provider? I remember in your talk you were saying you kind of went out there and just started looking, but how did you find
Yeah.
us?
No, it's really funny because I was going through my notes back from when I first started. I was wondering myself, like, how did I ever come up with Perfion? And based on what I found, I think I was really just out there on the internet looking. I don't even knew if I thought I needed a product information management system, but I was thinking, how do I get all these databases combined, consolidated? And I really don't remember how I came upon Perfion. And I do remember though going through the process and really talking extensively with them for some time, because whenever you're doing something like this and it's outside and you're being a champion for it in your company, you want to make sure you're making a good decision. And I didn't want to come forward. I was new to the company as well when I was working on this, and I wanted to make sure I was coming through with a viable product. And there was a lot of unknowns I didn't know about. I wasn't sure about how do we support this? Who supports it when I have a call, 3 in the morning and something's not working? How's that all going to do? And some of that was unknown, and it was just about, speaking with the people at Perfion that kind of got me that comfort zone. But I don't really remember. Like, I don't think I had a request for proposal that went out to a big group of PIMs. I think it was basically just doing some pecking around and finding it.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to me since I'm involved in the industry, because here's a great question that I think many people are asking that just came in, and that is, were you familiar with PIM before meeting Perfion? Great question.
I really was not. I worked my job before this. I had transitioned a company off of a very old legacy system into SAP, and so I was familiar, like, with the MDM that comes with SAP, and something more along those lines. So I knew that we needed something that would consolidate our data, but I really wasn't familiar with it.
Interesting. I personally find that PIM is just not a widely used word here in the United States with our customers, and so it doesn't really surprise me that you might not have thought of PIM and found out what that was. All right, I've got another question here. Right, you talked about moving in chunks. So this question is, what did you try to tackle first with Perfion, and then second?
The first thing we wanted to do, we had to get like all the watches, if we had inventory on them, we had to get them into the database. And so that's where we started with, and I don't think initially it was parts. I mean, obviously we have many more parts than watches, but we basically started with this mass import of our watches, and from there we went to parts. And if I had one of my technical people on the call, they might be better able to tell me what every single thing we do with it now, because maybe we also sell, or not sell, but we give displays to stores and that type of thing. I'm not sure if those are in there yet, or maybe that'll be the next thing. But we basically started with the huge input of watches, and anything that we had in inventory we had to have in there, because it was going to be part of our nav implementation.
Oh, it sounds like you were doing them both together, implementing Microsoft Dynamics Nav and Perfion side by side, or did one precede the other?
No, yeah, we were doing it all together. It was part of a major project. So we were basically, like, we had to have the PIM in place we didn't really put the PIM, we didn't have Perfion connect our AS400. The whole goal of it was to have it connect to nav once we got nav up. And so like our cutover, part of our cutover plan for the ERP was to make sure we could load all the data. All the data had to be there from Perfion into nav. So as we loaded like the general ledger and everything else, we could have the product in there and understand that it was, ready to be placed on an order. And then we also then integrated it with our warehouse management system, which is Manhattan Scale. And so then it also had to go down to Scale. And, so this was a major, like we basically pulled the rug out from underneath the company, and we changed all of our systems.
Yeah, that's a pretty unusual approach, Trish, to let's tackle it all at once. So let me ask you a question, and that is, how important was it the native integration API back and forth between Perfion and Microsoft?
It was very important. Like the fact Perfion basically is like I've said a couple times, is the source of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
There's very little that comes back from nav to Perfion. Most of Perfion is like the pristine example of everything, so I'll give another example. So in our warehouse, I discovered maybe about 10 months ago that in the warehouse, they were updating Manhattan Scale with the DIMs for our product, dim weight, all that. And so what was happening though is that Perfion didn't know that information. And so we kind of just stopped everything and said, wait a minute, Perfion needs to be the source of the truth. So even the warehouse team were trained how to use Perfion. They update there, and then now we have like a trigger that sends those dim weights down into Scale, so that we maintain that single source of the truth. And that's been critical. And I never thought it would be a good idea to have the warehouse input something in Scale and have it go back and update Perfion. We just needed to make sure they knew how to use Perfion. They could put the information in there. It's very user friendly. I don't think there's been any problem with that at all. And they update it. It flows down into our warehouse management system, and there you go. We're fine.
Wow. Trish, I'm obviously pretty familiar with the systems, but it sounds to me like you have a pretty unique implementation in that you just said you have your warehouse and inventory you're running through Perfion and then distributing out, as opposed to using disparate systems and plugging it in to Perfion. Why did you decide to do that?
I don't know. From my experience, I just felt like this was the way that we need to move forward. I felt like this, as I looked at the big plan, and if you saw the diagram of our systems prior to where we are today, it was mind-numbing. And this is going to simplify everything. I knew that, and we just had to basically do the work, and it was hard work. I mean, it was 4th of July, I guess 2017, where we put nav into place, and everything started working, and we started just peeling off the layers of legacy. And we've been doing that now for 3 years, just peeling away all the layers of the legacy systems, and it's paying off.
Wow. That is fantastic. Really, really appreciate you joining us. I don't see any new questions. I'm speaking slowly just in case you want to sneak one in. Trish, we appreciate it. I do also have some polls, right, that we didn't get to because we got a little bit behind. So I'm going to move into polling. Thank you, Trish. Trish is the CTO of Citizen Watch. We really appreciate your time and really appreciate you being with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. And if anybody has any questions they direct to you, Rob, you can definitely send them my way, okay?
Great, I appreciate that. We actually did have a question about that if there was a contact, and I wasn't going to broach that until I talked to you offline, but fantastic. So
yeah, I don't mind it at all. I would love to. We're passionate about this product, and we're passionate about the system that we put in place. And I love to share the story.
Fantastic. Well, there you go. She offered, I didn't. And you please forward them on to us and we'll connect. Thank you again, Trish, so much for your time.